Well, on the reading list, one book that will figure is this book called Longing to Know by a philosopher lady, American, called Esther Meek, and a colleague of mine, former colleague of mine, emailed me just this morning saying she's in the UK, and I hope to see an online Zoom meeting with her on Friday night. I'll put in details of that as well in time. Anyhow, let's get going. So, the theory of knowledge. Socrates is the one you could say who started questioning, well, what is knowledge? And his conclusion was, as for me, all I know is that I know nothing. Well, of course, he was a very clever guy. And he was really extracting the Michael from some people who claimed to be cleverer than they really were, the sophists. But alongside, we put Manuel.
Can I just stop you? You're a little bit blurry, so I'm just going to turn the volume down a little bit. That might
fine, yes.
Stop this sort of echo
right,
type thing. That might be a bit better.
Yeah, alongside that, that's better. Alongside we have Manuel and John Cleese, who was a very clever guy. He knew all about Socrates, so he put in Manuel with Socrates' famous words. And of course we know this guy. Talking about knowledge, well, here's a guy who's into knowledge, but he says the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. Surely that's cutting against knowledge. Dearie me. It's the source of all true art and science. It gets worse. Schrödinger, Ernst Schrödinger, famous cat lover, or cat hater, depending on which way you look at it. He says, or said, the total number of minds in the universe is one. Now, this is not some Indian mystic sitting on a mat. This is one of the pioneers of modern science. And he says the total number of minds in the universe is one. In order to know, in order to have knowledge, then presumably we need something like a mind. And Schrödinger said, quite advisedly, the total number of minds in the universe is one. Another quote. It would be a poor thing to be an atom in a universe without physicists. And physicists are made of atoms. A physicist is an atom's way of knowing about atoms. And that was a very clever guy. So, can atoms know? Right? If knowledge is something that an atom can know, well, what is it? As we shall see later on, knowledge is extremely difficult to define. People have been trying since Socrates to define knowledge, and there are serious objections to the standard definition. Anyway, more of that later on. We all know about these things. Where would we be without them? Does it know? Well, it knows when to stop filling, doesn't it? Unless something's gone seriously wrong with the ball valve. So even a toilet system can be spoken of as knowing in some sense. Okay, so what can you expect this afternoon? Well, we started a fraction late, so we might not just get through all of this, but I'll do the best I can, and please, I asked Genevieve in the first row to say if I'm going too fast, sort of say to me, ease off a bit, or something like that, right? But justified true belief is the standard definition of knowledge, all right? And there are serious objections to that. I'm going to suggest in the 2020s we need to go way, way, way beyond justified true belief in terms of understanding knowing, if not understanding knowledge. So I want to cut free from knowledge because it's a tough concept and say, what about acts of knowing? A continuum, maybe going from an atom, or maybe smaller than an atom, up to humans knowing. But then, I put in down here, there's a lot of headspace above humans for what mind can be. All right? More of that later on, I'll back that one up. Okay, now I put here up here manifest or scientific. These are two forms of knowledge into which knowing is divided by a guy whose name escapes me right now, but it's me age. But it'll come up later on. Not a very famous guy, but it's a very helpful distinction to make between manifest knowing and scientific knowing. Or is it both? Now, we know that brains are involved in knowing, but since 1990, it's been known that the heart contains quite a lot of basically brain cells. They're called neurites rather than neurons, but they form what is known as the heart brain. If you knew that already, would you raise your hand, please? Okay, 1 or 2 people. Right, more of that later on. We'll make sure this gets in then. Not only does the heart have neurites in it, but our intestines, our gut does as well. So when people talked about gut knowing, long before people knew that there were in fact brain cells in the gut, people talked about gut knowing. They weren't so far wrong. Post-truth, that's basically, you could say, late 20th century. People saying, well, truth doesn't matter, what matters is influence, is what people believe, and so on. Well, not going to go into that in too much detail because it's knowledge today, but inevitably that affects how we view knowledge in the 2020s. Now, heavy trip here, you might not have expected this, but what about artificial intelligence? All right? The artificial intelligence singularity, which some people predict for the 2030s, some people push on a bit further, is when basically artificial intelligence can do everything that human intelligence can do and more, and do it when it wants to. All right? So that's artificial intelligence, which has got to be classed as some kind of knowing. Extraterrestrial intelligence. If I say July the 26th, 2023, does that mean anything to anybody? If so, wave a hand. Right, that was the date of a congressional hearing in the United States of America when a number of witnesses from the armed forces mostly were called to speak in front of Congress about extraterrestrials and, well, let's just say, who remembers seeing the Tic Tac videos that were released, I think, in 2021? Do you remember? Okay, you'll see a picture later on. I said again, a lot of headspace above humans for what mind can be. And so therefore, if that is true, then knowledge can go way higher than humans. Can anyone or anything come to the party? Well, maybe we want to exclude some things from knowing. But knowledge is certainly not humans' exclusive domain. And if, as modern physics tells us, everything at the very lowest level, everything but everything is joined up, then what implications does that have for knowledge? Okay, I don't think we're going to cover it all this afternoon, but we'll give it a good go. Let's see what we got next. Summarising this a little bit more. Critique of the standard theory of knowledge. Can it cope with physics? Since 1928, more of that later on. Virtual reality, that's for heavily linked to post-truth, and artificial intelligence. We know that you can have deep fake videos, can't you? Where somebody looks just like somebody, sounds just like somebody, but it isn't them, and they're saying stuff that they wouldn't say normally. So that's part of the critique of the standard theory of knowledge. Can it cope with these things? I don't believe it can. Even within justified true belief, there are issues. We'll look at those because that was on your prospectus that Genevieve put out, so I'm putting that in anyway. Knowledge versus skepticism. I know nothing, all right? We can't know anything. Would somebody please say to me, we can't know anything for certain?
Can't know anything for certain.
You sure about that?
I don't know.
All right? Skepticism has got its problems as well. We won't go too far with that. Knowing versus knowledge. What is capable of knowing? What about the brain cells in the heart and the gut? How can awareness of these enhance life and well-being in 2024. That is what we're about really today. What benefit is this going to give to us in terms of understanding? How is it going to enhance our lives and enable us to get more out of life in 2024? I mentioned 2 ways of knowing. Wilfrid Sellers, probably not a guy whose name trips off the tongue as being well known. I must confess, until I did my research for this, I'd not heard of him. But this distinction into manifest and scientific, I think, is extremely helpful. Right, the manifest world is the 3-dimensional plus time reality of the everyday world, made up of things and events, traffic jams, concrete blocks. That's the everyday world, the manifest world that we see. But we know from what we did at school, however much or little science we did, that that's not the way stuff really is. Stuff is in vibration. Stuff is made of atoms and whatever they are. And that's the scientific world, the reality that gets observed by instruments. You look through an electron microscope and can just about see stuff that's happening down at that level. And it's described through maths and abstract laws. And it's made up of particles, fields and forces. So those are 2 ways of looking at the world. Neither of them is complete, and we need both of them to understand, and certainly to have the technology that we enjoy in our world. So I offer you that as one of the things to take away from this afternoon, if you weren't into this already. The manifest, the scientific, 2 ways of looking at the world. But is either one of these knowledge? Well, I'm not going to take long over that and say, not according to justified true belief. So there's a problem already for the standard philosophical term. But there's certainly ways of knowing. And I give at the bottom there some illustrations of that. In terms of virtual reality, the manifest world is the laptop screen, or the screen that we're looking at here with the PowerPoint up on it. That's the manifest world. Underneath, making those work are operating systems and very clever electronics and stuff that's been designed by very clever people. That's the scientific side of it, right? Again, in terms of virtual reality, a YouTube video is manifest. You can watch it, you can see it, you can recognize things in it. But the data behind it, the zeros and the ones that are driving that, the algorithms that drive YouTube and bring up to you the stuff that the people who own YouTube reckon you want to watch and will get more clicks, those are hidden, but they're still part of it. So I offer you those as illustrations of manifest and scientific. Now, I've mentioned 1928, and this was a conference held in Belgium, a place called Solvay, and I don't know if it's still going, but up until then, certainly, there was a conference of all the main physicists in the world. And we see here in the front row, Einstein, yeah, and all the usual suspects, if you know anything at all about the beginnings of modern physics, are there. And up until Solvay 1928, the whole deal was keep mind out of physics. Just deal with the physical stuff. Mind can watch it, think about it, and so on, but keep mind out of it. But after Solvay 1928, these clever scientists had to recognise that mind and the stuff that they're looking at interact with each other. You cannot keep them separate. Now, I don't know if they told you that at school. They didn't tell me that at school, but I only did general science because I wasn't very good at science then. I'm not really now, but anyway, we won't go into that. But I call this a Copernicus moment. Like when Copernicus said, hey guys, look, the solar system makes a whole bunch more sense if we see it as revolving around the sun than revolving around the earth. And people started looking at things in a different way. The same way these guys knew they got to look at physics in a different way. But there's an awful lot of people who are still doing science that goes back to Newton and look at things in a Newtonian way. Okay, fine, it works for lots of stuff, but in terms of life, the universe and everything, and I believe getting the most out of life and of understanding life as best we can, I believe we need to go with these guys. Here's a nice little diagram of manifest and scientific. Over here you've got the scientific, all right? And here you've got the everyday world, a Christmas tree, sun, is it a house at a church, I don't know, a family having a picnic, a dog looking at a rose, all that kind of stuff. And one of the mantras of modern physics, observation collapses the wave function, all right? That the world that we see comes about through being observed. Is there anybody who is into playing computer games? Would you wave a hand if you are? Right, okay. You'll have to do the you'll have to do the best with what I can offer you. Now, I've been told that in a computer game, you do not have all the landscape, all the background, all the characters. They are not there all the time. They are only there when they're needed. All right? Now, that is taken by people who use that mantra as saying, well, the world's a bit like that. It's a wave function that is nothing describable by mathematics, but just a huge sea of information. But when it gets observed, then it collapses into those things. The scientific becomes the manifest. Here's another nice little picture for you. Manifest and scientific knowing, the manifest night sky. Who's seen the aurora? Come on, somebody's seen the aurora. Well done. We've tried, didn't we? We sleep too well. But the manifest night sky, you look at it, and at a manifest level, you see huge distances. You know, you think, oh, I can see Venus. That's thousands and thousands of miles away. But the nearest star I can see, that's got to be light years away. So far away, separation. That's the manifest version of the night sky. But the scientific knowing is the field as it's known. That vast is perhaps not a good word to use because space doesn't really apply to it. It's just a whole sea of information that is joined up and that is back of everything. Everything's joined up, so no space, no time, everything is now. That's your scientific view of the night sky. Okay, back to people. We've seen Socrates, and this guy with a funny nose is René Descartes. Down below, we have some modern people. James Jeans. Now, in 1930, he wrote a book called The Mysterious Universe. And I don't know why. I never got on too well with the vicar in the village where I was brought up in Cornwall. But for some reason, he lent me, I think it was because my dad might have told him I was interested in astronomy and the stars. He lent me this book called The Mysterious Universe. And I was only a teenager, but it was written really well. I could, even somebody like me, not very scientific, could understand it. And one of the things in it that really grabbed me was, well, one of the things that upset me was it said, not only is the universe stranger than we think, it is probably stranger than we are able to think. I thought, hey, this is me as a teenager, I want my money back. You know, all these teachers saying, get knowledge, get education, all that kind of stuff, you know. So, well, if I can't even get our minds around the universe, then the world, what's the point? Anyway, the other one was, the universe can be pictured, best be pictured as consisting of pure thought. The thought of what, for want of a better word, we must describe as a mathematical thinker. And on another occasion, James Jeans said, the universe resembles a great thought more than a great machine. This is the 1930s, the Astronomer Royal writing, expressing the kind of shocking stuff that had been around at the Solvay conference. here we have a guy, not very well known, John Archibald Wheeler, but his slogan, "It from Bit," which we'll explain more later on, is one that is very, very much in the forefront of what's known as quantum information theory. And you can study that at Oxford and at Bristol, I believe. Not many universities, but it's up there as one of the things to be studying these days. And he says, "It from Bit symbolises the idea that every item of the physical world has at bottom an immaterial source." So this table, the chair you're sitting on, your hands, your body, that has an immaterial, a non-material, non-physical source. That all things physical are information theoretic in origin. He is saying basically everything is information. It goes back to information in origin, and that this is a participatory universe. We bring the universe, as we experience it, into being by our observing it. Observation collapses the wave function. Now here you have these thinkers who are expressing knowledge to the best of their abilities. I quoted this one, but let's look at it in a moment. The stream of knowledge is heading towards a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a machine. Mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather to hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. Now this is not a mystic or a clergyman or a theologian saying back of everything is a great mind. This is a hard-headed scientist, the Astronomer Royal. Now, I've tried to put into a kind of whole diagram the way in which Eastern and Western insights on knowledge and the world interact. We start with Socrates saying, "I know nothing," and his famous exhortation, "Know yourself." All right? So in other words, I know nothing, I can't be certain of anything in the world, but know yourself, says Socrates. René Descartes, more of him later on, he's looking for knowledge beyond all doubt. Not beyond all reasonable doubt, all right? That's courts of law. He wanted knowledge beyond all doubt. And I'm sure we're familiar with his conclusion, I think, therefore I am. He could not doubt that he was thinking. Because if you're doubting, you're thinking, right? So he could not doubt that he was thinking. More of that in a little while. But Descartes, like Socrates, is saying only the inner world is certain. Know the inner world. But certainty is figuring too high. People after Descartes were not impressed with his demonstration of what he was unable to doubt and what was absolutely certain knowledge. They were not satisfied, and what it knocked down to is justified true belief. That's up to about 1928. But James Jeans says the universe is a great thought. So, not a great machine. Wheeler says it from bit. This is a participatory universe, so there's no inner world and outer world. It's all one. All right? According to these 20th century thinkers and scientists. But interestingly, in India, in the Upanishads, the Chandogya Upanishad, there is a man instructing his son about life in general and so on. And at a certain point in the Upanishad, I've got a picture of it, so I'll put it up here. The man says to his son, that which does not die is Atman. You are that Atman. So let's talk about his soul. But then the man says to the son, thou art that. In other words, you and the universe, the world, are one. Now, that was 6 centuries before the Common Era. So the inner and the outer worlds being linked together it's very interesting. You can come to it through science, or you can come to it through meditation and the kind of insights that come with deep thinking. More of that later on. Just very quickly, modern theory of knowledge at 10 to 3. Okay, René Descartes lives beginning of the 17th century. For him, knowledge meant certainty. But knowledge and belief seem to be in conflict. And as you would know, the 16th and 17th century is a very dangerous time if you believe the wrong thing in the wrong place. All right? So if everybody could agree on what we know, then wouldn't that be great? That was part of what Descartes was basically a decent guy. That's part of what Descartes wanted to achieve. So, what could not be doubted? He could not doubt that he existed because he knew he was thinking if he was doubting. But the question comes, what am I? His answer, a thinking thing. So, René makes a distinction between thinking stuff, Latin for that res cogitans, and extended stuff, that is things that have got, you can measure the weight of them or how long they are or where they start and where they stop. You can't do that with a thought, all right? So he said, right, there's two different kinds of stuff in the world that we call a dualism, saying there's extended stuff, non-extended stuff, and that was the basis of modern science until about 1928. So, science is about extended stuff, res extensa, and the scientist doing the experiments, he uses his mind to do the thinking. That's different stuff from what he's dealing with. But after 1928, sorry, you can't keep mind and physics separate. They're joined up. I'll skip those, they're too long. You'll get them in the PowerPoint anyway, from a guy called David Bohm. He'll be in the reading list as well. Now, here's a nice Venn diagram of justified true belief. Okay? So, the rectangle is the propositions, a statement. The cat sat on the mat. There is a cat sitting on the mat. It is now 5 minutes to 3. A proposition. Some of those will be true. They're truths. Some of them won't be, so they must be outside. You can't have knowledge of something that's not true. Some of them will be beliefs. I believe that I'm going to finish when the big hand is up to the 12 for the break. That's a belief. Some beliefs are poorly justified. But the gold standard, the bullseye, is knowledge which is justified true belief. Beautifully tidy, and it makes sort of sense, doesn't it? Now, if you want to go further, I recommend this book. It'll be on the reading list. For International Baccalaureate and for A-Level, you've got to do Theory of Knowledge, and that's a book that's useful, not thrilling, but helpful. All right? Very quickly through this one. Knowledge and belief. When we know something, we also believe it. Okay with that? Knowledge is greater than belief. I can believe things that aren't true. Knowledge equals belief plus something else. What is that something else? It's being justified. So knowledge is about something, but beliefs about things can be mistaken. We may believe there's enough in the joint account, but it's best to check that this is a true belief before making any significant purchase. I didn't know my partner had paid the council tax this morning. And to count as knowledge, then, the belief must be true. Oh dear. I'm going to skip that. Oh, rats, right. This is the last bit of that one. Basically said, what about when you get into virtual reality? And many of us have seen this one. Congratulations, $1,000 Amazon gift card. that kind of thing. That comes up on your screen. Now, is it true? Is it not true? That's where we have to consider very, very carefully what we press and what we don't press. So, justified true belief will not help us an awful lot in dealing with virtual reality. Second reason why justified true belief is suspect. This is a guy called, most people call him Ramachandran. He did a series on, it's called The Emerging Mind, that's it. 2023, I think, the Reith lectures. I know, because I was working with a group of students on philosophy of mind at the time, and I recommended that they listen to Ramachandran's lectures, and that, so I know it's 2003. He said, in a book he wrote then, indeed, the line between perceiving and hallucinating is not as crisp as we like to think. In a sense, when we look at the world, we are hallucinating all the time. One could almost regard perception as the act of choosing the one hallucination that best fits the incoming data. Right? Hallucinations that help us keep alive, that help us enjoy life and so on, but when push comes to shove, they're hallucinations. And then finally, the joined upness of everything. If everything is joined up, then knowing and the knower, they're joined together. I won't worry with that one. Right, this is a lovely place for us to wind down before the break. Living with the limitations of manifest knowing. If I take the time to rumble this scam, will I miss this opportunity? All right? Tricky, isn't it? And the scammers know it, so they will make sure there's going to be some time limits on things. Second one, am I talking to a person or AI? I'm sure many of us here will have developed schemes for getting past the AI when we're talking on the phone. You know, otherwise you can take up an awful lot of time. But there are different ways of doing it. You might want to share some of them during the break. But it's a real question. Is this Joe Biden or is it an AI impersonation? And we've got elections coming up. Right? Remember Northern Rock, the great financial crisis in the noughties? Right? Was Northern Rock really in trouble? I don't think we'll ever know, probably. But, or was it the rumours that made the trouble? Sure as shooting though, the queues went around the block, didn't they? Post-truth flourished with social media. You know, you can put up your own avatar, or you can retouch your photograph and that kind of thing. Artificial intelligence takes post-truth to quite another level. And then an interesting one. What about the placebo effect? You know, whereby you have a test of a drug. Some get the drug, some get a sugar pill, but they're told it's the drug, and some don't do anything, and you see who does best. All right? Not knowing there is important. You can't do a placebo test if you know. In order to know or to judge whether the drug is going to be legal, you've got to not know. There I put the placebo effect, joined upness in neurophysiology and biophysics. Let's see what the next one is. Yes, this is a wonderful one to close with. You have no way of knowing. This is a very powerful phrase. When I was teaching secondary and a union leader, very often you would get all sorts of stuff chucked at you. And I knew enough theory of knowledge, and the people knew that I was teaching philosophy at A-level at that time, and that I could just look at them and say, look, you have no way of knowing. You know, if they made an accusation and I knew they couldn't know it, I offer you that as one of the things to take away from today. Nearly finished, Genevieve. Right? Some of the accusations. Your hidden agenda is... Right? all you're after is you always look down upon people, you have no way of knowing. Thank you for your attention. I think you deserve a break.